Hello, everyone. My name is Neil Powell. We're excited to start the second episode, of the Unlimited Agents podcast. This is my guest, Moses Parente. Moses, really happy to have you on here.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be a part of the podcast. Thank you.
Amazing. And yeah, so some background here. Moses is now a cloud engineer. He's working at FedEx, originally went to Queens College, very proud Queens College alumni. And he's also involved in local politics as well. So yeah, wanted to dive in. Yeah. Anything else you would want to add to that, Moses?
So I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I was born at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, lived all my life and was raised in Queens. My parents, funny enough, they met on the N train going from
Okay.
Union Square to Queensboro Plaza. So that's pretty much as New York as it gets. And so I think like with that in stone, it was like I was just born and raised in the city, and I knew that I would love to build a life here, and right now I don't really want to leave at the moment. But overall, I've really just spent the last few years ever since I've graduated from college to really just explore more of the city and to be able to get more involved in how everything goes and just take advantage of all the opportunities that New York City provides.
Amazing. And so you spend most of, like, pretty much all your childhood, adulthood here in New York City, right?
Pretty much. I was born and raised in the city. I grew up in Queens my whole life. And being able to grow up in Queens, you meet many different people across many different backgrounds. And because of that, because of the huge amount of diversity there, as well as the changing demographics over time, you get exposed to a lot of different types of people. And that was one thing my childhood was pretty much all about. You meet different types of people who come from different types of cultures, religions, and it gives you the ability to have a more nuanced perspective of things and being able to look at things from an open mind.
Amazing. Yeah. And yeah, you went to Queens College for college after that. Was there any particular choice in why you did that versus, say, like a SUNY?
In all honesty, I when I was in high school, I was not the most ambitious kid. I was just I kind of just went to class and I went home. And when it came to college application times, I saw Queens College and I thought to myself, Queens College, I live in Queens, so let me just go apply to that. And I just hit that apply button and I got in. So and it carried me to the rest of the way. But I do not regret that decision whatsoever. I'm very happy that I went to Queens College. Queens College has a amazing history in New York City. Many of the state legislators, people in the New York City government, and even in Congress have went to Queens College. You can see you often see many of the city and state officials going to Queens College to host events, and because of their alumni network that is so deeply embedded into government, even acting as well, and in tech and in all over the city, there's a very big alumni base over here in New York City that expands that expands very vastly. So if you're a Queens College student, for any Queens College students watching, be sure to reach out to any alumni and professors that are in Queens College because they can take you into a lot of places and open a lot of rooms for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, given your background, right? Like, I know you're in local politics and we'll touch upon that. But I was curious on like why you chose computer science as your major and ultimately got into the technology space.
So when I started CS, I mainly did it because I wanted to get involved in cybersecurity at first. Back when I was in my early times of college, one of my friends, he brought me onto the ISACA New York case study competition, which was a consulting case study that centered around cyber attacks. And I wanted to do something like that ideally, at least career-wise when I first started off. And that let me getting into my first internship at IBM as a cybersecurity engineer intern. And because unfortunately Queens College didn't really have like a cybersecurity focused curriculum, I ended up just sticking with computer science, and I decided to follow that because I thought that okay, having a CS degree will help me do good in cybersecurity. Now I don't technically work specifically in cybersecurity now. I mainly focus on cloud automation and infrastructure as my regular day job, but there's a lot of overlap and cybersecurity principles that still need to be applied in that field. So overall, I think it all worked out for me in the end.
Nice. And I know you did the first, I guess, exposure to cloud was at Kyndryl. Yeah, could you maybe talk to me about that internship and like how that opened your eyes to like what cloud could provide?
Honestly, yes, of course. So when So, for those of you who don't know, Kyndryl is the world's largest IT infrastructure company, and it used to be a part of IBM. It was IBM Global Technology Services at first, and they ended up spinning off in 2021. I was an intern at the time at IBM, so when I was looking for other internships and looking for what I wanted to do after, I some connections that I had back from IBM who ended up moving on to Kyndryl referred me to the Kyndryl internship program that they were doing. So I ended up jumping ship and going along with Kyndryl. And at the time, they just made these new partnerships with Microsoft Azure and AWS and GCP. So they were really looking to reboot their whole cloud infrastructure, and they wanted me to, and a lot of the other interns that I was on, to learn more about cloud computing technologies, especially infrastructure as code. And because I came from a cybersecurity internship at IBM, they wanted me to focus on something called policy as code. And that's when I realized, I actually really enjoy cloud infrastructure. And I think this is something that I want to keep on doing for the long term, at least for now. And I saw it as a pathway for me to getting a job and landing something out of college, because the environment was starting to become a little bit volatile. Everyone was always getting their internships rescinded or their offers rescinded. And I wanted to make sure I at least had something secure by the time I graduated college.
Yeah. And I know now you're working at FedEx. Is that correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. And really, cloud has seen quite a resurgence. Yeah. Want to see more of, I guess, your perspective on that and how you're probably utilizing some of these AI tools that are out there.
Well, my perspective on the resurgence of cloud. I remember back in 2014. You can also tell me if you remember this too. Everyone was saying cloud is the future. Cloud is going to be like everything was just cloud, 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 cloud. Everyone was just slapping the word cloud on it, pretty much anything. Kind of like how they're doing with AI today. And over time, cloud started like the investment started not necessarily diminishing, but it wasn't doubling down on it. It was becoming more modernized instead of just the future, because everyone was using it. And if you look at the market share, AWS, GCP, and Microsoft Azure are pretty much the ones who dominate the market. But then with the rise of artificial intelligence, and with all the learning language models that we're using, and especially with all the data centers that needed to be built, cloud infrastructure, the demand for it basically more than doubled over time. And because of that, I think I lucked out in terms of, I guess, employment. So the way how I see it, if there is going to be a need for cloud engineers or cloud admins, people who are working in the cloud space specifically, we're definitely, at least I guess, one of the more safe career options currently today.
Nice.
That's just my own limited opinion. You guys can say whatever you want in the comments or whatever if you guys have anything to say, but that's just from my perspective.
Nice. And for someone who's listening to this right now, say they're a CS student, maybe looking to get into cloud, like what are some of the things you recommend them looking into to help them get just a head start? Obviously, they're going to be doing a lot of learning on the job, but for them to help get their foot in the door.
I definitely think checking out the fundamental certifications is the best way. I know a lot of people have their own opinions on certifications, but for me, for college students specifically, or even anybody who is just brand new to cloud, I think a cloud certification is great, because especially the fundamental ones, because you don't necessarily know if you want to use it or not. But once you get the certification, it's not a bad thing having it, Like
Yeah.
I see people who work even in non-tech roles have basic cloud fundamental certifications like the AWS CCP or AZ900, just to name a couple off the top of my head. And I think it's a great way to be exposed to the basics of cloud, what is cloud computing in general. And with that, you can see is this something I want to do in the future? And also, if you want to experiment with like the labs that you see on Udemy, or the ones that are provided by AWS and Microsoft Azure, I think you can definitely do those and check those out for yourself. Kind of play around with it. And if you wanna go into more of the infrastructure as codes side, I think that's great. One of the first ever pipelines that I've built myself was I used Terraform, AWS, and GitHub Actions to make my own little CI/CD pipeline that would like deploy EC2 instances. This is like super basic back in college, but when I first just started getting into it, but overall, I really did enjoy it. And I think those are my, I guess, top tips of what I would tell students or people who are just getting into the space, how they should approach seeing if this is something that they want to do in the future.
Nice. Yeah. I was going to ask, maybe this is a bit of a side question. Have you explored any of the like AI inference platforms? Like Base 10, I know Modal's another pretty hot startup in that space.
I haven't been able to check those out yet. I do apologize if I haven't, but I've just been quite busy with like work and a bunch of
Yeah.
stuff. I haven't necessarily had too much time with to check out those, but I definitely would love to do it in the future.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. Also another question too, and I'm sure that pretty much everyone in the corporate world is hearing right now. For your role specifically, like what AI tools are you using? Have you been able to automate any workflows? And maybe like where, for your role specifically, like these next 1 to 2 years, like where do you think there's a lot of green space to really kind of optimize the workflow for someone in cloud engineering?
In terms of like my day-to-day job, I don't want to get, I guess, too specific on it,
Absolutely.
but for like obviously job reasons and everything like that. But I think, but what I can say, like, I guess like on a more personal level, like what I would be doing in my free time when I'm trying to update my own learnings, I specifically for like the more security parts of it, using looking into logs and looking into like IAM policies and all that. I think downloading those and putting them into like Gemini or Claude, and then having them break that down for you, like, hey, why does this policy have XYZ? Can you like break it down for me, make it dumb it down for me like I'm a 5 year old? I think having AI dumb things down for you like you're a 5 or 10 year old and then explaining the technical terms after is a very great way to explain things that you're not necessarily familiar with. And usually I would have that explained to me like that. And then let's say I have a log that's putting something out and that's happening in the cloud. I would have AI kind of break it down for me like that. And of course, this is not necessarily specifically work related, but this is something that I would do, like let's say in like my free time or what cloud engineers overall would be talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'm like personally, I'm very interested in seeing just the applications of AI in education. At least for me, like when I was in college, everything I learned in math class was through Professor Leonard. He's like a YouTuber.
I remember him.
Yeah,
My gosh, Professor Leonard. He was really, really good. I remember he would like come and looking all jacked and all that, and he would just break everything down so great. He's my
yeah,
saving grace for Calc 2. Sorry if I was
yeah.
interrupting.
Same here, same here. And like I don't know, like I'm curious, like, as a CS graduate, I studied econ. Like, where do you think the future of CS education kind of looks like right now? Because like you can use, Cursor's composer model, Anthropic's Opus, like they can do a lot of the work for you. In terms of like helping people build out the fundamentals, I'm curious on that perspective, but also too, right? Like you mentioned, using it as a learning aid. I think if people
Yeah.
really tapped into that, like there's so much more opportunity and learning for just everyone involved.
What I would say is a little bit controversial. I don't think the CS curriculums across schools would adapt that much. I think largely the educational system is way too slow to adapt to the learning environment, like the learning needs of what businesses are actually doing on a modern basis of what's happening right now. And more students are just going to be again just self-learning. I mean, that's pretty much what most CS graduates have done. They just self-taught themselves while their classes were facilitated by the professor. Because again, for everyone who is studying right now, the professor's job is to facilitate your learning. It's not his job to make sure you're learning. It's the student's job to make sure that they are learning. It's your job, not the professor's job. And more students are going to be using AI to increase their ability to learn. And unfortunately, I don't think the education system is just going to be able to keep up with that.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Makes sense. I know while you were at Queen's College, you were also involved in student government, now
Yes.
taking that to local politics. Could you maybe touch up on, I guess, like what you are doing in the local politics scene?
I helped out with a few of campaigns, especially on the New York in the New York City space, especially in Queens, which is where I grew up. I was very involved in the campaign for Phil Wong's city council race for the Democratic primary and the general, and I really had a great time. Honestly, it was very, very fun. We were going up against a very well funded opponent who had about $1 million in independent expenditures, and then there was another opponent that we were going up against. And honestly, we were just having fun. Having fun is the most important thing to do when you're on a campaign, because you don't want to necessarily always be on it. And now that Phil Wong's in office, I'm glad that he's focusing a lot on the local issues. He's been very supportive of the needs of the people, especially having good quality of life and supporting public safety for everyone.
I am curious, a lot of people, when they want to get involved in politics, they'll start maybe a little bit bigger, right? They'll go like state level. A lot of people aspire to national. Curious, like why you decide to go at the like local city level, and like what are maybe some people who are interested in the space missing out by not exploring that?
I mean, when everyone gets involved into politics, everyone kind of starts off by hopping on a campaign. And I've been involved in some campaigns that were on the state level and a little bit of the congressional level as well. But for me, local politics is the most important one because it's what affects you on a day-to-day basis. I had a professor, his name is Professor Jimmy Vaca. He told me one time, most people will never meet the president, but you can always meet your local city council member, your state senator, your state assembly member. And that is 100% true. Most people will never meet their president, maybe lucky if they see their Congress member, but the people who actually make decisions that are going to impact your life on your day-to-day basis is your politicians on the local level. Whether it becomes to education, zoning, even local technology laws to some extent. It's going to be affecting how you live on a day-to-day basis. And you want to make sure you have the right people who are doing the job for that.
Absolutely. Maybe pivoting a bit, but on the same note, we're both pretty excited about the election of Zoran Mamdani. Yeah, wanted to maybe get your initial thoughts, his first couple months in office, and maybe where you'd like to see him take on this mayoral run moving forward.
Like who I would like to see him take on the mayor run in like 2029?
No. I meant more so like who else, I guess like what other initiatives you'd like to see him kind of take on it to help improve New York City?
Of course. My opinion on Zoran being elected is a little bit mixed. I think that I've definitely always been a little bit more conservative on crime. I'm very pro public safety. Very much we should support the police. I was very disappointed to see that he stopped the hiring of 5,000 new police officers. And honestly, but he is our mayor, and he's going to be the mayor for the next 4 years guaranteed. Well, and we need to make sure that he fulfills his job in doing that. Now, in terms of how he handled the budget, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of how he did that. He kind of just kicked down the payoff date down the road until I believe it was like 2037. And for me, it's just like being able to spend money responsibly in the New York City government has always been one of the biggest issues that I've always seen. And I really do hope that hopefully our elected leaders can come and do that. And but hey, at least he's been very out there and has helped fix potholes, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I do think like the way he's been able to interact with people and just that social media presence, like his charisma, I think we can all agree is like unparalleled.
I think the one thing that he comes off very authentic in terms of his social media presence and how he is as a person. For number one, he is a very proud democratic socialist. I am not a democratic socialist, by the way, but he's very unapologetic about who he is and having an opinion that even can be a little bit polarizing because most people are not socialist, but they can respect him for having that opinion and that he's not going to sway from that.
Yeah, I know Zoran has made some comments about them balancing the budget, and you mentioned something about that earlier. Could you maybe like touch upon that, like how it maybe not be exactly what he's portraying it out to be?
Well, I don't think I'm the best person to. Well, I'll try to explain it in the best way that I can, as someone who I guess who just like who tries to read the news as much as possible. But we did initially have a $12 billion deficit that was mismanaged by the former administration, and some people like to also blame the state government on it as well. But Zoran came into his first term having to deal with such a large budget gap. And from the terms of it, from what I see, he just kind of asked the state government to bail him out and wanted the pension payments just to be kicked down the road as far as possible, so that way it can be a problem that's just dealt later on.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. That makes more sense now. I appreciate that. Yeah. So you mentioned, right, and I agree with you. I've always taken a little bit more of like a fiscally conservative, but like socially liberal approach. And, I enjoy that Zoran is very charismatic. I think that's really important, especially in politics as we keep moving forward. But I do want a little bit more of like a moderate presence, moving maybe towards like national elections.
What's your thoughts if someone was a socially conservative but a fiscally liberal? Gotta flip it around.
Well, so like I've actually met quite a few people like that growing up. And you can see that in the United States, right? There's plenty of communities like that. I don't think that it necessarily works out super well, is what I would say. I do think that ultimately, like with the socially conservative thing, we end up alienating other people. At least for me, like I remember, I think I was maybe like 9 years old when the 2008 gay marriage thing was happening. Like it just seemed kind of pointless that, we're looking to exclude people out of something that like we should be celebrating, like marriage. So I don't know.
I 100% agree. I think it's important that we stick to supporting gay marriage and pro-choice, especially here in New York City.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I am pro like capitalism. I'm proud to say that. But at the same time, like I look at someone like Mayor Bloomberg and the way he kind of opened up the city to foreign capital, like to that extent, I do think that was probably the wrong move. And like you can see, like, there's more people coming up now, right? Like Tucker Carlson's a very strong proponent of this, like the America First movement. I think like it's not unreasonable for people to say, like, look, I'm a citizen of this country. I think we should put my needs first. And I am actively going to go out there and campaign for people who are going to go and do that for me. So yeah, I think it's hard. Like there's a lot of different, I guess, moving parts in the politics space. Like one guy I really look up to is Daniel Lurie, the mayor of San Francisco. I think he's done a really good job of taking a little bit more of a moderate approach, but still, I think, maintaining as a Democrat and keeping up some of the values of the party.
I definitely see you're going for. I 100% see the Democrat Party in the future once Trump is gone.
Yeah.
And he will be after 2029. I think once the MAGA movement is dead and effectively phased out, I think we would want a return to normalcy. I think that right now, with Trump having dominated the political headlines for the past 10 years, I remember back in high school when he was elected and my teachers were going crazy about the impending rise of Donald Trump. First, we all thought he was a joke. And then, but slowly and slowly, they were like, oh shit, he actually might win. And then he won. And not only was he was not just a flash in the pan, he effectively stayed, even to this day. I think, but you can definitely see the way how the Republican Party is going. The Republican Party has turned into a cult. There is no room for anywhere in the Republican Party outside of bending the knee to Donald Trump. And people are going to want a sense of normalcy. People are going to want common sense and effectively just peace. Like, no one's going to want this political chaos and ultra polarization that's going on anymore. And that's where I think the Democratic Party has the best chance to really expand on and take over. And with the midterms heading in, I think the Democrats are going to effectively dominate the midterms. The Republicans will 100% lose the House of Representatives. I think they might even take back the Senate. I think they need, well, people say 4 seats, but they're going to need to take 5 seats because of John Fetterman. So there's definitely a lot of room for the Democrat Party to grow and take advantage of once Trump is gone.
Yeah. Well, I guess considering that, Trump did win both terms, right? I mean, he lost to Biden, but both times, I guess he's won twice. What do you think that maybe some of these Democrat candidates were missing? And that for this 2028 candidate, what do you think they need to display that will really be able to win over, the heartland of America and just the Electoral College as a whole?
Well, the reason why Donald Trump won, once after Donald Trump got shot, I knew it was over for the Democrats. They could try to put in Kamala Harris or whoever. It was over. It was what they should have done once Joe Biden won the presidency is be very, very honest with themselves and say, look, Joe Biden is not in the best shape to, Joe Biden is not in the best shape to keep going for a second term. We need to find a successor immediately. But what was their biggest downfall in in the 2024 elections was the fact that they had no primary. All the delegates just came over and just chose Kamala Harris. They should have had an open primary at the DNC and effectively have the people choose a new Democratic candidate to replace Joe Biden. And the fact that they didn't do that, they just said, okay, we'll just throw Kamala Harris in and hope for the best. I think if they capture on the effect that, hey, look, listen, Trump is backed with a lot of billionaire interest, and the fact that we need to focus on rebuilding the economy, and I think that Democrats have historically been better for the economy than the Republicans. It's just that Republicans have been better at branding that they're better for the economy than the Democrats, and people fall for it all the time. But if they can hound on the economy, because right now, gas is more than $5 a gallon? It's absolutely insane. And Trump came in here saying, hey, I'm going to fix inflation and all that, and in fact came in here to make things worse. And in all honesty, this is a great way for the Democrats to get back into power, get the presidency again, and overall make the country a better place for everyday Americans to live in.
Absolutely.
Keep pounding on the economy, pound on the performances, and people don't get into a whole culture war issue battle, because that's where the Democrats lost. But if they hound on the economy and promising a sense of normalcy and peace, again, don't have to be always very polarizing all the time. That's what they can use to anchor their way to victory and have a more promising future.
Yeah, I know Scott Galloway has mentioned this as well, right? There is that culture war issue that the Democrats oftentimes lose, right? We're both big UFC fans. The UFC is generally not a fan of the Democrat Party. Now, Dana White's a pretty big supporter to Donald Trump. I guess maybe to attract more male, voters in the Democrat Party, what should the next 2028 candidate try to brand themselves as? I know Gavin Newsom is probably going to be a front runner. Republican side, we're seeing that J.D. Vance was supposed to be the front runner. I think increasingly Marco Rubio, people have mentioned. Yeah, just would love to get your thoughts on this space.
Marco Rubio definitely has been making some strides recently. I think what the Democrats need to do to capture the male audience is to be able to hear them out. Sorry, I was just getting a couple of notifications. I think what the Democrat Party needs to do to win the male audience again, or the male demographic, what they need to do is to make sure that they feel heard. You don't necessarily have to don't ignore the male demographic here in the United States. Be sure to make sure that they're heard out. What are they feeling? And promise and enter as the competent person in the room and show that, hey, we're here to provide you a better future, because right now men are not necessarily doing so well in terms of how young men are doing in grades and school academic wise, and especially in the white collar workforce, many were promised jobs, and now junior level positions are at the absolute lowest it's ever been. A lot of young men are basically jobless, unfortunately, and this is where the Democrat Party can say, hey, this is what you were promised, but we're here to make sure that you can get on that pathway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Maybe pivoting in a somewhat related thing. In that 2024 election cycle, Kalshi and some other prediction marketplaces had a lot of steam going in there.
Yeah.
I was curious on maybe some of your thoughts on the sports betting craze that's happening right now, where you can see the potential legality of it, and just overall, what are your thoughts on that space?
I love this topic 100%. The way I think that Kalshi and Polymarket are going to absolutely be even bigger in the future, especially with how much steam they've gotten in the election in 2024. With Kalshi and Polymarket, especially, they're not necessarily regular polls like how Emerson College or the New York Times regularly does it, but it's with people putting actual money on the line and saying like, okay, who's going to win? Who has the biggest percentage of winning? And in my opinion, because there's actual money on the line, it gives a little bit more of an accurate prediction of what an outcome is going to be in terms of an election. Because people are going to be voting a lot less biased based on their political beliefs or if they like the candidate or not, but they're going to literally just be putting money on who they actually think is going to win. And in terms of sports betting, I actually attended a few panels of this, and I always thought that it was very interesting to see like how different states are going to handle it. But I think with the way I personally think it should be legal. I think I'm personally someone who believes that your currency is a freedom of speech, and you are free to do with how you express it. And that's how I think sports betting should be handled in literally all 50 states. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess to touch upon that, like, I agree. Like, as a news source, it's so much better than polling, right? People are actually putting their like money where it is, and the anonymity factor too allows for, I think, more honest kind of choice making. So, yeah, totally agree with you there. It's hard for me. I grew up in California, where it's still illegal. I think that there's reason for that. Obviously, the I guess the American Indians are going to be kind of against a legalization of sports gambling within the U.S. But I don't know, man. Like, I can see the level of addiction that's out there. And it's just like, it's kind of scary to see. So I do think, like, I agree with you that legalization, I think, will ultimately be in play for all 50 states. I think these companies are going to continue to grow. But there's going to be a more bigger discussion on just how do we protect people here, right? Similar to, like, legalization of marijuana, right? It's grown so much, but at some point we have to have a conversation about, how are we keeping people safe, etc. Yeah, I mean, maybe moving on to something slightly related to, right? Both pretty into fitness. I know you're actually like an amateur bodybuilder, if I'm not mistaken.
I powerlift. I'm not a bodybuilder, but I will never rule out competing in a bodybuilding competition. I never say no to anything.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Increasingly, we've seen more and more people start using GLP-1s. And probably for the first time, every single year, right, the obesity rate has been increasing. For the first time, it's now decreasing. And a large part of that, people could say, is down due to these GLP-1s. As someone who's in this powerlifting space, wanted to get your thoughts on, peptides. What are they? When are they best properly used? And what are maybe your thoughts on the GLP-1 space moving forward?
That's a very good question, and thank you again for asking me that. Personally, I don't take any peptides or anything like that. The supplements that I largely take is just creatine. I take fish oil, vitamin D3, and magnesium pills.
Yeah, that's those a classic stack.
Like that. That's like my supplements that I take on a day-to-day basis, and I think that largely works pretty good for me. And aside from like just eating regular food and an insane amount of White Monster energy drinks, but overall, I think the whole peptide stuff. I think for people who are actively competitive on a large scale, if you can use it and the governing body that you're competing under will allow you to do it, then you might as well go for it. But if you're relatively a novice or you're just competing on a more local level, like how I compete on the local scene for powerlifting. I'm not somebody who's like going for worlds or anything like that. Maybe one day in the future, I'll never say no again to anything. But overall, I think if you're at the localish level, stay off of peptides. And if you are if you have been obese your entire life, I think I personally think it's best to just stick to the good old discipline. Make sure you try your hardest to get off of it. But I did hear I saw this one clip from Roy Lee, and he talked about if you grew up.
Clueless CEO.
Yes, the Clueless CEO. And he did say this one thing. If you grew up obese and fat your entire life and you want to use something like Ozempic, then you might as well do so. Because sometimes taking shortcuts aren't a bad thing. I have my mixed feelings on that, but I will not say that he's wrong. Because if this is something that you have been struggling for your entire life with like morbid obesity and things like that, and you want to use like GLP-1s or Ozempic for that, then he does have a point. And look, you might as well just give it a shot and just lose it all at once. So yeah. I'm not going to say he's wrong for saying that. I'm a bit conflicted, but I will not say he's wrong.
Yeah, I agree with
That,
that.
that that's my stance on it.
How long have you been lifting?
I've been lifting since I was in high school. I in high school I was not again I was not like an academically ambitious kid or someone who was like had crazy college aspirations. I went to a New York City public high school. I was just there to make friends, go to class, go home, and I really liked wrestling and Muay Thai. I absolutely loved watching the UFC. So all I would do was just train and go to the gym. And
Nice.
by
Yeah.
my sophomore year and my junior year, that's when I started lifting. I was taking some college now classes at BMCC at Bora Manhattan Community College, and I had the college ID. So that meant I had access to their weight room. And that's where I first started lifting. That's where I did my first ever deadlift, bench, and squat. And I'm very, very happy that I was able to do that because I carried on that for me throughout all my life. It's been a great way for me to just burn energy and, most importantly, just have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a reason why you maybe stuck to the traditional powerlifting route versus I know like a lot of people are more like hypertrophy based these days?
I always wanted to compete in powerlifting when I was in college. And once I graduated, I told myself, you know what, I'm going to do this. So right after I graduated, I signed up for a powerlifting competition. I called my friend's brother. Shout out to Alpha Out Fitness, my old powerlifting coach, who coached me for my last three meets. I called his brother because we had like some CS classes together, and he has a couple of brothers who were in the powerlifting space. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, I want to do a meet. Let's do it." And we ended up doing a meet on 6 weeks' notice, and I didn't do too bad. It was at the, forgive me if I'm just going down a little bit into memory lane. I think it was the USAPL winter. It was definitely a meet that was in the South Brooklyn weightlifting. Yes, it was a South Brooklyn weightlifting club, and I ended up placing like fourth in my weight class, and
Okay,
I didn't, I,
nice.
I didn't do too bad. But I definitely realized that this is something that I want to keep on doing and keep on doing recreationally, and I'm going to take it as far as I can go.
Nice. Cool. I know we're wrapping up on time here. Wanted to maybe ask, just broadly, right? You've had a lot of different life experiences. You grew up in New York City, like one of the coolest cities in the world, right? And yeah, out of these experiences you've had, right? Like what have been some of like the most formative kind of life lessons you've had that like there was something you want to impart to this audience right here? What would you want to share?
My top three advice that I will give to everyone is number one, it's not who you know, it's about who knows you. If you can know a bunch of people, you can know people in all different spaces, but if no one's willing to advocate for you, then those connections that you have are useless. It's about who knows you and who's willing to advocate for you specifically when an opportunity comes. And number two, again, never give up. I know it's very basic, but sometimes when you feel like you want to quit, when you feel like it's like you're all in the whole doom and gloom, it's all over mindset. Sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and just keep pushing through. That's one thing that I have learned from doing wrestling, Muay Thai, powerlifting, even studying CS and being back in college. Sometimes you just gotta push through and just find that second gear in you. And my my third piece of advice is to be respectful to everybody. I think showing respect and decency to everyone you meet, regardless if you like them or not, it will carry you a long way because
Thanks.
your reputation pretty much means everything. And if you're known to everybody as a decent person who's respectful, that will carry you a long way. You don't have to necessarily agree with everyone, but if you show that you are kind and you are willing to have a conversation with everyone, then that will definitely help you out in the long run.
Wonderful. Guys, this is Moses Parente. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm going to link Moses' YouTube channel below, as well as his Instagram. Feel free to give him a follow. Once again, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate it.